what I expect to be a robust engagement. I expect for new ideas to come to the fore, and I hope that we leave here with a plan of action, perhaps not even out of this session, but the one later on, because they correlate to one another, and the region will be better off from it all. We have had some negative experiences, Kadi, I could speak for, in terms of moving planting material, and we have learned some lessons. And I'm sure some of those lessons will be shared with us as well from other partners who operate within the space. So with that said, I thank you for joining us here today, and I look forward to the presenters bringing to us their experience and wealth of knowledge. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Tristan. And as we move forward, I must declare that I had nothing to do with all of these people being Jamaican. It really just struck me. But the non-Jamaican who we had on the program is not here at the moment, and we hope that he will make his way. Is this working? It is, okay. I hope that he will make his way as we progress. So the merchandiser who we have, who is from the Bahamas, was to bring a perspective from somebody who has to move material through the region. What are their experiences in terms of some of the challenges so that we could highlight them today. But we'll just move along to the second item, the challenges from a regulatory standpoint. And we have Damian Rowe, who is a Chief Plant Quarantine Officer in Jamaica, and also he serves on the Caribbean Plant Health Directors Forum as the secretary, technical secretary. And also he brings a perspective that is right along the progression of quarantine. And so I don't think there's another expert that we could have found to give that range of perspective right now. So the title of his presentation, he probably has paraphrased, but the essence of it, Challenges in Regulation of Regional Import-Export of Plant Material. Mr. Rowe, Damian, could you please take the...
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. All right, so my job here today is to give you the perspective from the phytosanitary side as a regulator. Of course, the regulatory bodies around the region play a critical role in the movement of germplasm. We have to satisfy the phytosanitary requirement. So if you're an exporting country, you must respect the phytosanitary requirement of the importing country. And that is very primary to the entire process. And from time to time, regulatory bodies, we have our own challenges that may seem to stand as or seem like it's an impediment to trade sometimes, or slow the process down, but it's not necessarily an attempt to slow a process down, but there are critical things that we must take into consideration when we're looking at movement of material or certifying plant and plant products going across borders. So this is the thing, green one. All right, so I will look at it in terms of two factors, internal to the regulatory body and, of course, external that the regulatory body may not have control over, but these are things that come in the path, right? So first, let us look at regulations and standards that is there. Can I step to the side? Probably just step to the side, yeah. Right. So we have to look at regulation. Sometimes there are weaknesses in regulation that prevent a plant protection body from exporting plant products or shipping plant and plant products across the border or receiving. And we have to look at these regulations, where are the weaknesses, are they impediment to the whole movement of plant and plant products, and if we can fix them. Sometimes the border regulator body may not even have capacity to do proper enforcement, and that too is a challenge. You, as an importing country, don't want to import any material that is going to cause any significant issue down the road. So we have to be mindful that our regulation needs to be updated, needs to be in place to provide that wholesomeness to the process or complement the process of moving germplasm or plants and plant products. Or the law I spoke about that, can be a burden to trade facilitation. And of course, we're in the age where we look at trade not just in one, just to export or to import. The key component that a regulatory body plays must also have facilitation built within. So we're not just regulators, but we are regulators who facilitate trade. And sometimes that can be confusing and it can be a burden to the entire process. When you look at these impediments or these weaknesses in a system, it gives possible outcomes. And as I look at it, you can have a regulation, a regulatory law that really don't have any true purpose or any meaning to the entire process that you're trying to uphold. You're trying to protect your country, but do you have the right provision built into the system to protect your country? And that needs to be there. You can have people, by exporters, importers, they are disgruntled. You're trying to slow the process up. You're trying to stop us from importing. I'm very disappointed in you. Things like that. We have to be mindful of what we're doing, right? And of course, you can have a more serious issue, which is a bilateral conflict, right? You're blocking my trade. I'm going to take some action against you. And dispute settlement mechanism is now in place, and I'm sure that will be tested. Julie. Right. So there's a mechanism in place to look at this dispute or issues, phytosanitary issues, SPS issues within the region, and see how we can, of course, have a more smooth and robust playing field. Let us look at resources limitation and weak infrastructure. What's the issue there? We often hear regulatory bodies speaking about the resources that they don't have. We don't have enough reagent to do testing. We cannot test because we don't have enough money in our budget to buy this material. We don't have proper testing facilities. There's delay in the procurement process. So that's sometimes if you don't have direct control of your procurement procedures, that can take long. If it's a different, same government entity, but a different section of the entity that carries out procurement, and you have multiple agencies within that one organization sending in procurement items, things to be procured, then you may fall yourself in a queue, and things may take a long time based on the built-in procurement procedures that are governed by what the government agency is governed by. I know in Jamaica we are governed by financial regulation. We have to buy by certain provisions. We can't just go and buy things as we feel. There's procedures to do that. So when we talk about limited facilities, inspection facilities not adequate, testing and treatment, you may not even have a treatment facility to carry out simple treatment that will speed the process up. And that can be an issue, all right? And no mechanism to adapt quickly to new technology. Are there new systems out there? Are you scanning the horizon, looking at what technology you could be adapting to your new, or to your system, and how that can improve your delivery, your outcome? So we have to be mindful of some of these things if we don't have proper mechanism in place or policy that guides you how you operate your or function on a daily basis. It may require you to implement some of these things, right? This is a big one, right? Inadequate staffing and knowledge loss. So we look at the fact that as a regulatory body, we're constantly complaining about the lack of staff. You started the operation with probably 4 staff doing risk assessment. But the amount of work that comes at you on a daily basis, your risk assessors are not able to carry out 10, 15, 20 PRA assessment and complete all of them within 1 year or within a couple of months, depend on the demand. And you have to prioritize now. And even after you prioritize, you find that you have to go back and prioritize, reprioritize the priority, right? so staffing issue is a big issue. And if you don't have a proper mechanism in place or have the capacity to even increase your staff pool, that is an issue. Usually that requires, changing of your structure or changing of your regulatory framework to enable you to have a more, complementary staff to do the work. There is training loss or loss of skills. People are moving from one place to the next because of sorry, I can remember back in the days, people, maybe, I don't want to call age, but older folks will stay on the job because they love the job. And this is what their passion is in the work. And salary might not be much, but it's something that they love to do. The younger generation, they're not doing that. They come, if the salary is not good, if they feel bored, they are going. And organizations are there. Just last night, somebody was telling me that they're hiring one of my staff. And it's a key member of my organization. And that will impact any institution if you're losing key members to other organizations that are paying well. So if you have too much work coming at your staff, what will happen? They're going to be demotivated. They're going to be disgruntled. They're going to be, you're going to get some aggressive features from your staff. You're wondering, what is the problem? Why are they so mean today? Right? But we have to be mindful of some of these things. Your effective balance, in order for you to stand as a strong institution, delivering, protecting your country, and of course pushing out solid outcomes. We want 5 risk assessments completed within the next 2 months or 3 months. You have the staff, you have the staff complementary, you have a skill set to push that forward. If you don't have it, you're going to have an imbalance. Training gap. Do you have a capacity to actually train your staff if you want to ensure that your staff is functioning at high level? Are you ensuring that your staff are actually trained and you retrain them from time to time? Sometimes we don't remember that training is critical and we must keep our staff up to date. And the other thing, you might have staff that are failing to really trying to upgrade themselves. And when succession planning come about, these staff are not able to move forward, right? Because they have sat there for many years, feel comfortable, and never try to upgrade themselves. So you want to ensure you have cutting-edge staff that are actually moving with time, current, and be able to deliver with the change in the environment, right? So we look at these things as very important. You want to have a modernized staff, modernized organization that impacts the trade process in a meaningful way. We have to be looking at these things carefully. Establish training mechanism that will stand the test of time. So moving on. So international regulations, another set of factors that impedes your ability, our ability to respond to an importing country's trade requirement. Sometimes you may not have it within you to implement what the importing country is requesting, and that can be an issue, right? Certification such as ASAP and Global Gap are also coming at you in your country to say you cannot export to us unless you have certain certification. And that is real, right? So you don't want to be losing market share because you're not able to reach it. Market access is another issue. You talk about getting to new market. We talk about establishing or putting forward your market access proposal, doing risk assessment. We spoke about the sometime it takes. And these are things that, the whole thing about risk assessment, market access is a very, very lengthy negotiation process. You push forward something, it's, you have to, you want to send mangoes to the United States. They propose something, you look at it, okay, could you have it changed to that? And you have, back and forth negotiation process. But it's critical for us to constantly look at that. And the last one I want to touch on is stakeholder. Your stakeholder is a very dynamic pool of business operators, importers and exporters. They think they want to do their business. Sometimes they don't understand what you do. They don't understand your role and function. They don't understand the policy that governs the operation or the procedures. And they constantly believe that you need to do more. But we have to be in a position where we're constantly training or updating, sensitizing the public on what we're doing and how to get to where they want to go. It's a twofold process, and the regulator cannot do it alone. We need the business operators and other key stakeholders to be a part of the entire process. So that's it for me. I'm here for questions.
Okay, he didn't disappoint. I'm sure you're very aware now of all of what exists in terms of the challenges and some of the roles and responsibilities of the regulators in this issue that we're discussing. Now, the next person on the program needs no introduction, really. Dr. Janet Lawrence, she was with CARDI, and I always say that when I'm introducing her. She was trained at CARDI, and she is now with the she's now at ICA, and her capacity with ICA is that of agricultural health and food safety specialist for the Caribbean. And she's going to give us some of the ideals with respect to this SPS and other relevant aspects of germplasm movement.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. It's wonderful to see familiar faces, people I haven't seen for decades this week, and new faces. So I am the second person in the relay. Juliet is going to be the anchor leg. So Juliet, drink some sweet drink to get that energy. So I am going to speak to you about trading movement of planting material. And what I'm looking at are sanitary and phytosanitary concerns and the role of robust regulations in mitigating the risk of moving the planting material. So it's quite a mouthful, but I'm going to try and break it down as simple as possible. So what I'm going to do is just speak a little bit first about the movement of plant propagation material and the risks associated of doing that. Then look a little bit at the pathways of plant pest movement, application of sanitary and phytosanitary measures to minimize these risks, and what is the role of a modernized regulatory framework, and then give some closing considerations. So this entire week, our focus has been really, how do we accelerate our food and nutrition security goals? How do we accelerate the 25 by 25? one of the foundational building blocks of increasing production in the region is having high quality, clean planting material that's pest tolerant, and here I'm looking at arthropods and pathogens, that is climate resistant, climate tolerant or resilient, and of course high yielding. And what this means is that we may be now looking at new varieties that we need to get from external sources outside of the region to come in and supplement what we have. What it also means is that we may need to ramp up our production within the region because we have some very unique varieties. So we will need to ramp up production and move it around the region. But and when we look at what propagative material is, it is any plant part capable of and intended for planting, to grow something. So we're looking at seeds, corms, stolons, seeds, the whole plants. And when you look at the 19 commodities that the governments of the region have said are important for us towards meeting this target, there is a wide range of ways in which we need to plant them. So the whole situation is very complex. That's the bottom line. But what we see that moving planting material is a phytosanitary risk. Why? Because we can introduce exotic pests, and in addition, some may be invasive, okay? And this, therefore, would impact what we're trying to do, which is to be food secure. And of course, this impacts livelihoods and the environment. And just to drive home the point a little bit more, I want us to go back to 2009, when we had a very stellar study conducted by Heike Meissner out of the USDA, evaluating the Caribbean in terms of a Caribbean pathway analysis, looking at pathways of plant pest movement within the Greater Caribbean, with the aim of developing a strategy to prevent the introduction and spread of exotic pests. And so they looked at a wide range of pathways: human movement, airline passenger baggage, that is very famous. People break off a little piece of plant and put in the suitcase. They looked at international mail. They looked at hitchhikers, wood packaging. Importantly, they looked at propagative materials. And what they found in the list was propagative materials was rated at the highest level in terms of the risk posed for the entry of pests. And if we take this further, we went back to that team in 2019, and through the Caribbean Plant Health Directors Forum, there are some key pests that are always on the horizon of every plant quarantine officer in the region. And what we did, we picked the top 5, and that affects citrus, vegetables, and root crops. And we asked them to look at the prioritized pathways for these pests of concern that we have. And once again, these pests, which are important to us, an area of weakness is that they are rated very high risk in terms of planting material and bringing in, having a pest incursion due to planting material. And so what is important for us is, as we move planting material, that we enforce sanitary and phytosanitary measures. And exactly what are sanitary and phytosanitary measures? They are measures that will protect animal or plant life from the entry and establishment and spread of pests. They are measures that protect human life or health from risks arising from diseases carried by plants or plant products from the entry and establishment. And they are also measures that protect a country from the entry, establishment, or spread of pests. Now, what are the measures? Because a lot of time we speak about the measures, but the measures are a range of things. There are laws, decrees, regulations, and there are requirements and procedures. And Damien would have spoken to the whole issue of testing and inspection and certification. There are quarantine treatments. There are statistical methods. How do you sample? If you bring in planting material in a container, how much do you take out? All of those are SPS measures. And one of the things that we have to remember is that when we conduct these measures, right, in order to ensure that we have the appropriate level of protection to plant health, human health, and animal health, we must do it within the established rights and obligations of the Sanitary and Phytosanitary Measures Agreement of the World Trade Organization. And when we apply these measures, we, as members, as countries, we have a right to protect our citizens, a right to protect our animals, a right to protect our plant life and health. And it's important for us in the Caribbean. Why? Because many of us depend, agriculture is important, but many of us depend on tourism. And basically what our tourism product is our ecology. So if we have something that is coming to wipe out our flora and our fauna, it not only impacts us in terms of food production, it impacts the quality of our tourism product. So we have that right. But we have to remember when we are applying these measures that it must be based on scientific principles. We can't just get up willy-nilly and say, okay, in order for you to send this to me, I want you to XYZ. You must have evidence. And it must be applied in a manner that it would not constitute a disguised restriction in the trade of the goods. And so when we look in the region, across the board, so this is generally, not necessarily for planting material, we see 4 bottlenecks as it relates to SPS measures. We are seeing that there's inadequate enforcement and implementation due to limitations in the regulatory framework, and Damien touched on that. Delays in applying SPS controls due to inefficiencies in the operations of the people that do the job. Limitations in the capability and the capacity in the competent authorities to enforce the controls, because you can only enforce if you have the teeth. And the teeth you get through the regulations, the regulatory environment. And limitations in the capacity of private sector stakeholders to implement the measures needed. So in the case of planting material, if there is a private sector organization that has invested in producing planting material, how do you treat the planting material to ensure that when you send it to the country that it's destined for, it is clean? There are strict measures. How do you do that? So we're saying here there are some limitations in that capacity. So the foundation of these measures is really a regulatory framework. If you have a strong regulatory framework, it helps you to enforce and it helps you to be able to implement. And when we say the regulatory framework, we're looking at it in the broadest sense. What is our policy environment like? Our legislation, our standards, protocols, and guidelines. If we don't have these things in place, there are going to be delays, leading to planting material staying on a port to be tested. By the time it gets to the grower, the viability is not there. Can't plant, can't meet your acreages, or they are in such a bad shape that it will take many weeks to get them back to some point where they will be viable when you plant them. So what we need to ensure as the foundation is that we have a modernized regulatory framework, okay? And so if we look in the area of policy, we need to have a policy that is integrated and considers the range and the complexity of the system, because this is not a simple task. But I'm pleased to say that within the region at this point, we have a pretty strong foundation because we have policies in place that will help us to create the environment to allow us to trade plant and plant products, planting material. Under the 11th EDF SPS Measures project, which is funded by the EU, in collaboration with CAFSA, we have developed an integrated agricultural health and food safety policy, an action plan, and a national policy framework. And this is to help and guide countries in developing their policy environment in a more integrated way. We did a survey 2 years ago, and only 40% of countries had an integrated policy. In addition, we have a biosafety policy, which is critical, another underpinning that is needed, and a biodiversity policy, which is now being currently updated. So we have the tools and the framework for countries now to utilize these documents in strengthening their policy systems. I just want to speak a little bit about the policy, the integrated agricultural health and food safety policy. This policy, as I said, is very broad. And what it seeks to do is to ensure that we have the appropriate level of protection for plant health, human health, and animal life and health. And what this ensures is that if we strengthen our agricultural health and food safety system, we are able to meet better, are better positioned to meet our food and nutrition security targets, optimize and intra-regional and extra-regional trade. And what the policy does, it realistically addresses the key regional systemic issues, some of which I would have spoken about before, and optimizes the issues and optimizes the current national and regional capacity. For the interest of time, I'm not going through this. But I want to say what underpins the policy is data. We need to be able to collect data so that we can understand the threats and the impact of the threats and be in a more proactive mode as we move ahead. Now, Damien spoke about the whole issue of legislation and having regulations. 3 years ago, we went to countries and we said, in terms of your plant health bills, how old are they? 3 countries had legislative bills less than 5 years old. We had countries having bills older than 20 years. In terms of regulations, 5 countries under 5 years old, and the rest greater than 5. And when we further said, has your country experienced any constraints relating to the implementation of SPS controls, which means our ability to enforce and implement? They said yes, because of the outdated legislative framework. 78% of countries said they were affected by that. And when we asked what were the constraints, if you look in, they were not able to enforce SPS. That was one of the highest factors, issues that were pointed out, and unable to trade. Okay? So what it means is that we must upgrade our legislation. So one of the things that we have been able to do in collaboration with CAFSA is the development of a plant health model bill. And this plant health model bill is now being used by countries to modernize their existing legislation. Lastly, we must use harmonized standards, protocols, and guidelines. We must come to an agreement. It is easier for us to work and agree on what it is that we would like, not what it is we like. What do we agree on in terms of what are the most suitable measures to be able to ensure the highest level of protection of our plant health, our animal health, and human life. And so all countries in the CARICOM countries are parties to the IPPEC and are heavily involved in the whole development and review of standards and the adoption of standards. And so that's very positive. In addition, CASA and the CDB, they have developed harmonized guidelines for the priority commodities identified by the governments. And Juliet will speak about that, because that's a huge step in terms of helping us to move forward in a more efficient manner. And last but not least, there is a formalized plant health body called the Caribbean Plant Health Directors Forum, which provides a platform for plant health directors to dialogue and come up with guidelines and protocols that safeguard the region. So, concluding considerations. We have established the fact that attaining phytosanitary security of traded materials for planting is very necessary to minimize the risks and unnecessary delays. But some considerations. We must update the current legislation. We must update our pest list. I know that this is a pet area. I should say pest area, but pet area for Juliet, for CASA. We must strengthen our human resource capacity. And Damien spoke about it. And we have to start looking at innovative ways. How do we work more as a collective? Last year, CASA led a regional PRA, pest risk analysis, for citrus canker, which was groundbreaking for us as a region. Can we do that for other pests? Especially for countries where we don't have that capacity? We have to start thinking as a collective and start thinking outside of the normal way, the normal framework. A quality assurance system for phytosanitary compliance. As we ramp up in countries, can we put a quality assurance system in place that would help with improving the efficiency of moving this planting material? And last but not least, we need to really improve the awareness of risks associated with the movement of planting material and the requirements to safely move the planting material, not just within our territories, but from extra-regional sources. So, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you. I want to say that this is something that we need to get right now. They said yesterday that we are 50% of the way in terms of meeting the targets. It means that moving planting material is something that is more the immediate. It's no longer medium to long term. It's a short-term activity. And so we must address that immediately towards meeting the 25 by 25 goal. So thank you very much.
No problem.
Thank you, Dr. Lawrence, for that very comprehensive overview of what is required, ideally. And we really need to get as close to at least 90% of that ideal if we want to do things very safely. We have on the program at this point a question and answer. I just wanted to throw out, because I haven't seen our importer-exporter, if anybody in the room is an importer-exporter who could give a few points on what are some of the challenges given all that went before. Is there anyone who is in that? Oh dear, I just lost the screen. Yes, I lost my program. But is there anyone who can give that perspective? Or, okay, we'll have some of that perspective from Dr. Mary, but I wanted a private sector entity. And I'm looking at this friend that I just met, but I guess she doesn't feel confident enough to come forward. All right, so I'm just waiting on my program to come back up. Thank you. All right, so shall we have some discussion on what has gone before for about 3 minutes? Any questions? Any reaction? No? Is there anybody online asking any questions at this time? Okay, so I guess, okay. Hold on, you have to. Let me use this.
No, she can use this one.
And turn to the camera, please.
Yes, I just want to.
Turn to the camera, please. Yes.
Yes, I just want to hear
And
opinion
introduce
how
yourself.
at the regional basis we take an approach in facilitating organic producers. It's a very sore point, and Damien mentioned that they're to the point when people take you personally, when you explain that you cannot do certain things, but in the same time we have to facilitate because it's a livelihood for many persons, and it is something what we probably can look what is the best way to facilitate organic producers within, and if we need to do any intervention beyond the regions to facilitate them. Can you pass to me? Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Young. Regarding organic producers, we have started in Jamaica, we have started with microgreen producers, and that's a special niche market. We understand that the seeds that go into operation cannot be treated with fungicide or insecticide treatment. So what we have done is we have sat with them and we have developed a protocol and a compliance agreement with a work plan that is supporting what the import process should be, and that will carry us from import right back to the cultivation point, and there are key things that needs to be done along the chain so that we don't have any adverse impact on the environment or no spillage over into the environment in case there is any pathogens. But, yeah, so that's one mechanism. But the bigger group, in terms of a bigger organic group, we have, I think we're just at the discussion stage, although we could write into the model mechanism to have these organic seeds imported in Jamaica. But we have started with one set with the microgreens, and then we want to then see how we can move into a bigger picture. But at least we have a template that we could be working with.
Is there any
No,
other?
just to jump in a little bit, because she did ask about at the regional level. And it is something that we have discussed, because strictly speaking, organic production or organic certification doesn't fall under CAFSA as an SPS agency, because it is not an SPS issue per se. So to require organic certification, for example, is not an SPS requirement. So because of that, it doesn't really fall on us, but there have been questions and discussions as to how are we going to to look at organic production and organic certification at the regional level and the mechanism through which we can do that. Because which organization, as it were, is it going to be CARDE? Is it going to be somebody else? And I think probably that is where we need to go, rear discussion, Marina, as to what is the mechanism for dealing with organic production and certification within the region as it really, I mean, we've also had some discussion before with AICA, but those discussions are not mature enough to provide you with the answer that you're probably looking for at this time.
Another question?
There's another question?
Just face the camera, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Letitia Gibson. I just wanted to ask you to repeat the question you asked everyone earlier about difficulties with exports.
Right. Just wanted to know what are some of the challenges that an exporter finds that meets when they're trying to export something.
Okay. Okay. So I mentioned my name, Letitia Gibson. I am a representative at Braun Limited. We are a development consultancy agency, and I know you looked at me seeing if I had any input on this. I also served as a farm manager at Eden Farms. We did have a partnership with Eden Farms where they had 3 of the region's first hydroponic containerized farms. So they were 40-foot containers that were outfitted to produce vertical columns of leafy green and vegetables. So we did grow microgreens. We had variety of basils, variety of lettuce. We also grew edible flowers. And we were tinkering with growing, that was like fruits. We've seen research where strawberries were successfully grown in farms like ours. The models that we purchased were from freight farms. And it's now recognized, especially in the United States. The Bahamas was the first in the region to bring that model, and it was a very exciting time for the Bahamas. It was the first time that persons were able to see such technological advancement in agriculture at such a large scale. We were able to supply local consumers, but we never really tapped into the export field, so that's why I didn't really raise my hand.
Okay.
I did get training, so I am a Produce Safety Alliance grower. So I do know about certain aspects of what was it? Sorry, phytosanitary methods, and just imploring certain protocols in the farm so that you're eligible to export to outside markets. But we never tapped into that. It was a very young company. It's something I would definitely love to look into in the future. But right now, at Braun, we're working on a project. It's a very new project. It hasn't yet been launched. But we are looking to fill the gaps within agriculture in the country and make that scalable for the region. So knowing what regulations are in place to allow farmers to have an ease of getting into that export market, making them competitive and allowing them to market their products and putting themselves out there so we could increase our export rates. That's what we're looking at right now.
Okay. Thank you. Certainly relevant. So we moved from one of the females of the panel. Sorry. Omaira.
Hi, my name is Omaira Avila Rostan, CARDI representative for Belize. So my question is, one of the questions we always being asked, if there any way where I could determine or just look what are the less of pests for a country, for a product. That is always the question, and I myself don't know how to answer it. So I'm asking to you all, you all have something like that, by crop, by pest, that people could go and say, okay, this is Because sometimes when you do the whole process, they tell you, okay, go, and now, oh no, this one needs a pest risk analysis. No, this one is clear. But you don't have a place. You have to go and come. Now, in small countries, that's not a problem. But in countries like Belize, that is 4 hours to go anywhere, you want to just go online and check it out. So I just want to know if that exists. Thank you.
Oh,
All right, I can respond to some of that during my presentation, if that's okay. But we're also trying as best as we can to pull together for everybody the list of pests for each country. So we do have some, we don't have all. So there are two lists. There's the list of pests in general, that's the country pest list, and there's the list of pests that are being regulated by that particular country. But I will talk a little bit more about what we have so far when I do my presentation.
when she comes up just now. Okay, thank you. So we introduced one of the females on the panel, trained in CARDI. And it's now my privilege to introduce to you the superwoman of the region when it comes to plant health. So if you never met Wonder Woman, you're meeting her today. Juliet Goldsmith. She's a plant health specialist in CAFSA. CAFSA is the Regional Plant Protection Organization, and a lot of what we're talking about, some aspects, many of the aspects fall within the portfolio of this superwoman here. And so she has two presentations. We couldn't give superwoman one. And so she has two presentations which will run right after the other. And so you know what they are. She's going to give an overview of the guidelines which Dr. Lawrence mentioned, which were recently developed for various commodities, some 19 guidelines. And then she is going to speak to the development of guidelines for movement of coconut and coconut products in the region, and a guidance document for conducting pest risk assessments. That second one, we, CARDI, will be collaborating on this effort. So, Ms. Goldsmith, would you please, Juliet, come?
Okay, so good afternoon. No, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out where to stand, so I don't have my back to the on the whole time while trying to do this. So we're going to play a little bit of a game of which of these is not like the other, because I will not be talking specifically about plant germplasm. I'm going to be a little bit more general than that and talk about moving commodities. And yes, it is about plant germplasm, and I should explain because who mentioned the APP? Tristan mentioned the APP project, and that project did develop protocols for moving plant germplasm within the region, and there were 7 documents. And we really were trying a few years ago to move those through the system and get them adopted. But then COVID happened. And persons were concerned less with what they were going to plant to harvest in 8, 9 years, and were more concerned with what am I going to eat now? What am I going to eat tomorrow? And so rather than pushing those protocols on moving planting material, we focused instead on looking at commodities. So products that are already done, that you import, export, you eat immediately. And Malcolm is here, so I have to make this sound really, really good, since the CDB did provide the funding for doing that. Right, so it is about, of course, advancing movement of plant germplasm within CARICOM. But specifically now, I am going to be looking at the 19 guidelines that we prepared to facilitate intra-regional trade, and so that is very specific to our region, in plant products. So we did it for plant and animal products, but since we're all talking about plants today, it is plant products. And this is a very brief, emphasis on brief, overview of the project. So really, why we developed those documents, what did the commodity list look like? I am still finding it difficult to see the screen. What do the guidelines cover? What are they intended to do, really? And then the second part of the presentation is what Dion mentioned about those guidance documents and doing PRAs. Right, so why develop the guidelines in the first place? One, the first thing we did recognize was that there is low level of intra-regional trade. And we know that going in. But then it is a why. So we hear a lot about SPS barriers. So we don't trade effectively with each other because there are barriers to trade that we put in place to, well, Damien mentioned it earlier, or at least it seems as if they're in place to prevent movement into and probably outside of our country. But then why are these SPS barriers here? And Yasmin get tired of me saying, but why, last week. So I am back to saying, but why? So one of the things that we recognize is that we do have some inappropriate application of SPS measures. So it is not always that persons don't want to trade, or the countries want to say, nope, or to prohibit trade. But sometimes there is a lack of understanding as to what we're supposed to do. And when we do put something in place, then they're not the right measures appropriate to that particular trade. So we do have that as a concern. And the other thing that we get the complaints about, Damien mentioned lack of capacity to do PRAs. Persons will say it takes forever. I mean, I submitted this request, this market access request 3 years ago. We still have not received a response. What is the problem? So we do have that. And of course, there are reasons for that, which Damien spoke about. Because we do have that lack of experience, their lack of human capital, as it were. We do not have the technical competence in a lot of instances to actually conduct effective, and I should put it that way, risk assessments. We don't have the data that is necessary. Hence, her comment about not knowing what pests are in the region and what pests to regulate, and what are the organisms that a particular country is concerned with, which is the type of information you're going to need if you're going to do a risk assessment. So these were the concerns we have, and so we decided that in response to that, we would prepare commodity-specific guidelines that would provide the information that the countries would need to do the risk assessment and, as it were, make decisions as it relates to the trade. So it is about making science-based risk management decisions. So Janet talked about you can't just arbitrarily say you need to do this. It has to be based on science, appropriate level of protection, all that fancy word that they talk about at the SPS committee meetings. Right, but what do the guidelines themselves cover? So yes, they do cover a list of the pests that are associated with a particular commodity. So for example, it is a guideline on yam. It is going to list for yam all the pests that are associated with yam in the various countries within the region. It will not list them by country. So Janelle is not going to say St. Kitts and Nevis, these are the pests, although we did collect that information. But it is going to say for the CARICOM region or the borrowing member states, these are the pests that are associated with yams. Then they will also provide for you the list of pests that are being regulated by the various member states, again relevant to that commodity. Because when you're applying, or at least when you're setting SPS measures, you're only doing it for regulated pests. And we're going back to all our SPS agreement and the IPPC, in that we do not regulate organisms that are not of quarantine importance. So it is not something that is in your country, or if it is, you have it under some sort of official control. So the guideline will provide you with that list as well. And then it will give you options for phytosanitary measure. So it will say for this particular pest, these are the options that can be applied to manage the risk associated with moving that particular commodity. All right, I will speak slowly. Right, but where would this list come from? Because we get that all the time. I mean, how did you come up with this list? Why 19 and not 20? 20 is a nice round number. Why not 15? Another nice number. We had 19 because we were taking this list from somewhere else. But we also realized that we had to do some sort of consolidation because initially we had like about 40 commodities. And developing guidelines for 40 commodities wouldn't work, so we put them in a species group, for example. So one is the priority commodities identified by member state. So the CARICOM Secretariat would have contacted all the member states and say, hey, what are those commodities that you would like to trade? What do you have that you can send to somewhere else? But also, what are the commodities that you would like to import? And so the member states provided us with that list. We also look at the list that we have in the Regional Food and Nutrition Security Policy and Action Plan. So they have a list of priority commodities, so that was also considered. We also considered products that are being traded now. I mean, what is being moved from one country to the other? And finally, we had that CARICOM Private Sector Association list of commodities that they thought would be great for them to, that they want to import, but they thought that would be useful for this 25 by 25 initiative. And using all of that, we came up with that 19. And that's what they look like. So we had 5 animal products: eggs, sheep and goat meat, dairy products, beef, honey. And because we are so much more important, there are 14. We don't have any animal health person here, right? We have 14. We have, okay, all right. We have 14 plant and plant products. But what I meant, if you look at, you will see cucurbits. While we have cucumber, watermelon, pumpkin, and squash, it is just one guideline for cucurbits because they're going to be similar, they're going to have similar pests, et cetera, et cetera. Also, the same thing for solanaceous crop. It is there just as one guideline, the spices, legumes, and so on. But if you were to pull all of those out individually, it would definitely be a longer list. Right, so how to use the guidelines is really about providing you with recommendations. And the operative word here is guidelines, because I have to explain to Malcolm why guidelines are not standards and why we know talking about standards. So general recommendations on how to perform a task, or we provide advice on how to proceed. So it is not prescriptive, and it gives a list, a range of options that you can work with. It is important to recognize in this case, we're not trying to replace the country's right to conduct their own risk assessment. So if you have the capacity to do risk assessment, then fine. Go ahead and do it. But the guidelines will also be useful because they do provide you already with that list, with your pest list. You know, when you initiate your PRA, you have to do your pest list. The guidelines will assist you with that. It will also assist you with knowing what are the regulated pests that you're concerned about. Well, that I said already, provide information necessary to make your SPS risk management decisions. So really just a decision-making tool, but really recommendations that you can adopt. Now, the idea based on request from a couple member states that will remain nameless is for us to evolve some of these documents into standards. Because then standards, I mean, I'm going to use the word prescriptive in quotation mark, but it will be a little bit more precise, And then it will allow the countries to put these into their regulations and so legislate some of the things that are within those guidelines, which you would not necessarily be doing with the documents we have now. But in general, and for the use of most of the member states, the guidelines are sufficient. Okay, so back to the second presentation now, which is about looking at guides for coconut and coconut products. And it's in the works, so it is something that we're working on now. So there are two documents that we're working on. The first is similar to the guidelines that I just mentioned. So it is about guidelines for facilitating inter-regional trade in coconut and coconut products. And that quite likely is going to include germplasm. So that's my concession to the entire session. Right, so that is one document, pretty much what we said for the other 19. So we will finally have our round figures. This will be number 20. That will be, but then the second one, so Dion mentioned that the second one is a CARD CAFSA. For the project, they would have already prepared a document on risk assessment and how to do risk assessment for coconut. We're just going to improve on that, we hope, a little bit. So it will be a guidance on conducting a pathway pest risk analysis for the importation of coconut and coconut products. I think I have another slide. Right, so what it will do is, just like the others, provide you with this list of pests that are associated with coconut in all the countries, a list that CARD already has. Also, the list of pests of coconut palms that are being regulated by the various member states. Another list that CARD already has. We might need to do some update. What is different is the last one, which should have changed. So rather than options for phytosanitary measures to mitigate the risk, we're going, this is right. So this is what this guideline will look like. Yeah, this is the first one. Sorry, I'm getting old. Right, so the second one is what is going to be different. And this is the one that we already have that first part of the document with. The first two are the same. The third is where it is different from the guidelines that we already prepared, in that the third one is a step-by-step process for doing a pest risk analysis for coconut or coconut products. So for those countries who do not have the human capital, don't have the capacity, don't have the money to pay somebody to do a risk assessment, the previous one, this goes back. It doesn't like me. This is your guidance document that will provide you with the information as well as options at the end that you can use. If you really want to do your own risk assessment, then this is the document. And so that third part will take you step by step through initiation, categorization, the whole 9-yard for risk assessment. And it will provide at each step sort of an annotated template. So it will say, consider X, Y, Z. It will also give you criteria for this, determining high, low, medium risk, et cetera, et cetera. Then at the end of the process, when you get to risk management, it will assist you also in not just a list of options as the first one, but how you then assess those risks, those options to determine which ones are appropriate for you, which are the measures based on my trading partner that I should recommend and ask for on a phytosanitary certificate, for example. So those are the documents that we're currently working on. We will get to them eventually, we hope. Right, so in conclusion, just to say the guides, they are intended to assist in removing or reducing the SPS-related barriers to trade that we're currently experiencing. They are to provide the member states with a list of SPS measures for managing the pest risk associated with trade of the specific commodities, we are looking at 2 documents for coconut. The last will have guidelines similar to the 19 already approved by COTED, but then a new one that will provide you with guidance and doing a pest risk analysis for coconut products. So thank you very much.
Okay, I did say she was Wonder Woman. She finished 2 presentations way within time, and she affords us time for discussion. But before, I'm still going to defer the discussion to where it is on the program so that we can welcome yet another superhero in the region. You know, we are CARDI, you know, we only deal with the super ones. So he needs no introduction either, but just for those of you who have been out of the region or somewhere else, Dr. Wayne Myrie is a plant pathologist at the Coconut Industry Board in Jamaica. And as the general manager said earlier in a session before, it's the only coconut industry board in the region. But despite that uniqueness, Dr. Wayne Myrie is a guru within the global coconut sector. He is renowned for his research, especially in lethal yellowing of coconuts, and he was recently named second most, I'm sure I'm not going to get the accolade right, but basically is the second best coconut researcher in the world. Yes. A very close second, I'm going to add. And it was in Asia, the international coconut community, and that was the outcome of that. So when I tell you we don't play small, so I was trying to make sure that you understood the fact that this sort of imbalance with the Jamaicans on the panel was was not contrived or nepotism in any way, that they deserve to be here. They are really good experts in their field. And so Dr. Myrie, without further ado, I'm going to invite him to come and share with you some of the experiences of moving coconut germplasm, and so we can have something to discuss later
on. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman, for those kind remarks. Yeah, I'm feeling at home here because I see a lot of colleagues and friends that I know. But I want to begin my presentation by saying all protocol observed. And I want to specifically mention CARDI, the invitation of CARDI to be here today, along with ITC, International Trade Center, my colleagues from the Coconut Industry Board, the general manager who is here with us today, Mr. Sean Cameron, other colleagues from the Coconut Industry Board, other colleagues from around the region. My task is to specifically speak about coconuts and the movement of coconuts, but I will give a preamble as to how do we get to the movement of coconuts and why we need to take, and some of my colleagues have mentioned it, specifically pay attention to some of the many challenges that can affect a country along with the trade of coconuts. I was trying to work out how I'll do this presentation by not looking at and looking at you. Okay. So let's see if I can do this simultaneously. Biosecurity risks. We have to look at some terminologies and make sure that we all are on the same page. Biosecurity risks refers to the likelihood of a disease or pest entering, establishing, or spreading in a country. risk assessment, the evaluation of the likelihood of entry, establishment, or spread of a pest or disease within the country. On what basis do we do an assessment? We do an assessment on the framework of general surveillance, the collection of data used in institutions. We want to know where the actors are, who are the actors, the relationship between the actors. We also want to know the invasive species and their environment and the infrastructure that surrounds the general surveillance. And we have general surveillance, active surveillance, and specific surveillance. And all of those comprised by giving us specific data that will inform us how do we go about mitigating against entry of those pests and diseases. So it has various components, and the first one is preparedness, then management, response, prevention, active surveillance, and general surveillance. The movement of coconuts to another country has pathways, and those pathways can be categorized. Import, vessel, passenger, mail, air, and Dr. Lawrence mentioned this before, and sea. And what do we do pre-border, what do we do at border, and what do we do post-border? And how the risks have decreased from pre-border up to post-border. And those are some of the measures in the boxes that has to be considered. So, plant biosecurity, a set of measures designed to protect a crop, crops, or subgroup of crops. And we have to develop quarantine policies that protect plant health from threats. And those threats are from pests, but not only the pests themselves in terms of the adult pests. You have to think about also their life cycle structures. So you're talking about the egg, the larvae, the pupae. Those reproductive, those structures are also important for consideration. And then you have the diseases, the pathogen. But looking at the pathogen, you also have reproductive structures within those pathogens as well. So you're talking about your spores, your fruiting body, if in the case of a fungal pathogen. And so you have to take that into consideration. And then last but not least, which we often forgot to mention, is the weeds. Because you now have weeds that are around, that are not in countries, that will cause problems in the country that it gain entry, especially when you bring it in the context of climate change. All right, so we have to pay attention. And those weeds have reproductive structures as well, such as seeds, and you have to pay specific attention to those. I lost the mic? Oh, I'm still on the mic. Thanks. So the purpose of movement of coconuts for planting material. Okay, sorry. How do you go back, Diane? This way? Red? Okay. And for primary material for processing, and again, I mentioned assessment of the risks, but you have a risk matrix that can be done. And that risk matrix can help you to determine what the level of your risk. All right, so you take that into consideration when you're doing your assessment. Luckily, for coconuts, it is relatively protected by its own shell, which makes it less vulnerable to pests. But Gian asked me to, Ms. Clark-Harris asked me to give a specific experience that we have had. We exported some nuts from the Ivory Coast because we wanted to broaden the genetic base in Jamaica. And when the nuts arrived, I went and examined the shipment. And in that shipment, is it in spite of or despite of? Is despite of. Despite. Despite what was done in terms of the fumigation on the other side, we found a live larvae of rhinoceros beetle. So this is where you need an expert. Somebody who knows about these issues, who can have a look to see if there's a problem. Now just imagine if that rhinoceros beetle larvae had developed, then you would have had a situation in Jamaica of rhinoceros beetle. All right, so that's a sort of, it's important for us to, and we did the right thing. I mean, when we went through all the measures, and in doing the right thing, we have an expert looking at the shipment to make sure that there's nothing there before we actually put this in our nursery. So we did the right thing, right? And we also had a post-quarantine measure that we would have taken. So we did the right thing. So inevitably, the movement of germplasm involved the risk of accidentally, which captures this really well, introducing plant quarantine pests along with the host plant material, in particular pathogens such as viruses and phytoplasma. Here again, I want to sensitize you to the information out there about a phytoplasma disease called Begonia. Begonia is in Papua New Guinea. The phytoplasma in Begonia is the same phytoplasma in coconuts. So the phytoplasma moves from bananas, the same phytoplasma moves from bananas to coconuts and back to coconuts. Bananas to coconuts, back to coconuts. So we have to take this into consideration also when we are seeking to get material from that region or the South Pacific region. The philosophy that guides transboundary movement of coconut germplasm. One, introduction and spread of these pests and diseases are preventable if all countries take adequate measures to avoid and control. Two, countries should establish appropriate infrastructure to protect from new introductions to control pests to their territories. Countries are able to take quarantine measures that impede trade only if biologically sound and economically justified. Protecting countries' crop production system enhances food security. Because ultimately, all that we do in terms of protecting the crop systems in our country is to make sure that we protect food security for our people. So what are the range of pests and diseases, coconut pests and diseases you have here in the region that needs to be considered? You have the lethal alien disease, which is in Jamaica, and I will only mention Jamaica here because I'm a Jamaican. I won't mention the other countries that have the various problems. You have the ambrosia beetle, also in Jamaica, and those are pests that you wouldn't find in some countries in the region, all right? And then you have rhinoceros, a type of rhinoceros beetle. You have the coconut moth borer, the American palm weaver. You have heart rot. Those are the diseases and pests that you should take into consideration when you are importing or exporting coconut in the region. If you're looking outside the region to South America, and when I said the region now, I'm talking about CARICOM, that's the region. I mean, with Suriname and Guyana. Now, if you're looking outside of South America, then you have other diseases of coconuts that are serious enough for consideration. You have fohash, you have kahima, you also have poroka, And Poroka is of unknown etiology at the moment. So those are some of the disease that you will have to take into consideration. And I know people are taking material from Mexico and from Brazil. So I'm saying to people here, take things into consideration, get an expert, look into it very carefully when you're exporting or importing into your country. So the order of importance here, in my view, that is my humble view, is the lethal yellowing disease, because it's devastating to coconut plantation everywhere that it occurs in the region except Belize. All right? For some reason, the climatic or whatever conditions in Belize does not lend for the sort of devastation that we observed elsewhere in the region. So Dr. Goldsmith spoke about guidelines. And hence, I know that they're developing guidelines, and the guidelines have components that are important. And I will leave that section because I believe in her expertise. Specific guidelines for the movement of coconuts, though. Germplasm should be collected from palms that appears healthy. Germplasm should be collected, and I mean nuts now, all right? Nuts should be collected, should not be moved from site at which disease of unknown etiology occurred. Germplasm or nuts should preferably be moved as embryo cultures, because there you can mitigate against the risk of introduction, or pollen. With the pollen, though, you have to be careful as it relates to a viral disease out of Asia. Right? The coconut foliar decay virus. You have to be careful of that because it can be found in the pollen. So you have to do disease indexing, ELISA tests, etc. Seed nuts may be transferred under certain circumstances. When a thorough pest risk assessment indicates that there are no problem of quarantine concern in the area from which they were collected. From areas where disease of quarantine concern are present only when the embryo culture is not possible, and as long as they are germinated in quarantine, seed nuts should never be moved directly. Underscore, should never be moved directly from areas where you have non-cultivar molecules. Those are the phytoplasma. That's categorized in that group. Or phytomonas. Phytomonas causes the heart rot or citrus wilt in Trinidad and elsewhere in the region. Importing countries should seek pest risk analysis. Importing countries should send experts to examine material to be collected, the areas and so forth, take that into consideration. Seed nuts should be collected, and I said that before. Seed nuts should be collected from healthy plants, I said that before. Sample of seed nuts should be examined for pests and tested for disease pathogen. Now, oftentimes what we have experienced is that when you collect the seed nuts and put them in containers, there's a lag time. By the time the seed nuts arrive at the destination, they start germinating. Those, am I right, Mr. Rowe, you can correct me here, those seed nuts that are germinating should be destroyed. Only the seed nuts that are not germinating should be set in your nursery and should be observed for a period of time before you actually put them in the fields. So there are some basic standards which we want people to take into consideration. The nut should be intact, should be sound. Right? When you shake it, you should hear a slushing sound. When you pick it from the bunch, it must be brown. If it's even one on the bunch, it must be brown in color, which suggests that it is mature and ready for germination. It should be practically free from pests, practically free from damage, free of abnormal external moisture, because that gives mold. And when the person comes to examine the container, once they open the container and it's moldy, they close it up back and say, boy, we don't want this. All right? So we have to make sure that we create the conditions so that it arrives well. And there are some protocols that we have to look at. Not because they are the protocols they are for coconuts, but because they have something in them that we can take from them. The Katuhina protocol, we need to look at it as well. Look at it closely to see what in there, and I'm suggesting that to my good friend, right? And the Nagua protocol, if I pronounce it correctly. All right, and then you have the FAO guidelines that were developed from sometime in vintage past. Now, and I'm saying thank you, but remember the importance of farmers. Wheat makes beer. Corn makes whiskey. Grapes makes wine, and I love wine. Potato makes vodka, and I dare say sugarcane makes rum. Coconut makes Moscato wine as well. Thank you very much. You can't get drunk without the farmers. Thank you very much. Oh, I didn't change the slide. Sorry.
I'd allow you to, you know. Just go through them. Okay, thank you so much. So I'm sure you feel great. And I didn't remember this point of order. The last item that's on the program will be deferred to the next session, which is in the Poinciana. Is that the right room? No, room Poinciana, right? Room 2. Just now. So that's why I'm rushing, because it starts at 3:30. Dr. Barnett has to go across there. It's not 3:30 yet, Dr. Barnett. So I'm going to open up the floor for any reactions to what happened since the last discussion segment that we had before we close this session. Please, any questions, any clarification required, anything that you violently oppose? You may, okay, a comment. Please turn towards the camera and use the microphone. Yeah, we have some time, you know.
Yes,
so
good afternoon,
please.
Renata Gomes, Senior Base Nanny Grenadiers. Just to let you know, as Chief Agriculture Officer, I don't allow coconut, period. CARICOM, anybody come, I don't allow it. Yes, that's it. That's the policy with me. No coconut.
That's St. Vincent?
Yes, St.
Okay.
Vincent. So don't even ask, okay?
All right, we're not asking. Let us just underscore, every country is sovereign. We are not going in there to dictate to them. They have the competent authority in the quarantine officers, and we respect that sovereignty. We are not suggesting that you must, okay? So if that is something that everybody's going to charge at me about, I hope that puts up the wall. Any other questions?
Tissue culture with coconut. Is that an easy task or a difficult task?
Attend the next session. Don't answer Dr. Barnett.
Okay, sorry.
Attend the next session where we'll be taking that. And I did mention that the last item, and before Dr. Cameron speaks, the last item was the formation of a technical advisory committee for the movement of coconut and coconut products with focus on planting material. We're going to have it as a discussion rather than a presentation in the next session. So just migrate next door. And I also want to take this opportunity to recognize our partner from International Trade Center, Matthias, in the audience, the Regional Coconut Project that we have had the privilege of implementing here in the region for the last 2 phases. This is the man, or one of. All right, welcome. And I'm going to ask Brian Critchlow now to ask his question. Oh, after Mr. Cameron.
All right. For my colleague in St. Lucia, I'm a bit disappointed.
Not St. Lucia,
St. Vincent, forgive me. I'm a bit disappointed. Do you have a coconut industry?
Yes.
It's a small coconut industry, but we at the Coconut Board encourage our Caribbean partners to plant our coconuts. When you think of a tropical island, the first thing that comes to mind is beach, sea, and a coconut tree.
They have some.
So Cardi as a program. Okay, okay. Because that's the thing that Dr. Murray emphasizes. How do we manage the transportation of coconut seedlings to other countries and conforming to fixed protocols? When these protocols are established now, we're hoping that there would be the possibility of open trade amongst our Caribbean partners. And I want to say that the Coconut Industry Board, along with its partners, are encouraging Caribbean countries to invest in coconut. It's $1 billion industry based on the value-added products from coconut. I would also like to reach out to my colleague in Green. Forgive me, I don't remember your name.
Juliet.
Juliet.
Yeah.
We'd like to work alongside with you, Juliet, to pull on the resources of the Coconut Board, the expertise of Dr. Mary, Dr. Millicent Wallace, to help develop that policy and that documentation for us to abide by as Caribbean partners. So we're here at your beck and call to support your activity.
Yes. Okay.
All right, so
we're
thank
gonna, ask Brian Krishlow, who is the immediate past chair of the Caribbean Plant Health Directors Forum. Welcome, Brian, and go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. My apologies for missing most of the meeting. I had to sit in Cardi Board of Governors meeting for my minister.
You're alone.
I just want to say to support some of what Juliet said and make a plug for some work that CPHD and CASFA has been doing. To underpin movement of material around the region, commodities and germplasm, we need data. And through the CPHD and CASFA, we are rolling out the Caribbean Biosecurity Interception System. CBIS has been developed, and I know those who are here from the member countries, we're really encouraging to adopt this platform. This is a digital platform at ports of entry, which will allow for rapid tracking of interceptions at your ports of entry and documenting this information. And if we can get to the point where we can not only keep this information for ourselves, but to share this information regionally, it will provide us with an incredible tool to look at transportation routes, to look at risks, to look at where pests are coming from, where we're intercepting them, to look at potential pathways for entry, and allow us to build out on these commodity standards that we have, and really give us the data to be able to figure out how we can trade effectively and what measures of mitigation we need to put in place. Because we always remember we look at risk, but the flip side of risk is mitigation. So once we can mitigate the risk, then we can trade. But without proper data, that is very challenging. So we are really encouraging all the member states to move forward with adoption of this platform, as I said, and sharing data, because we unfortunately, Caribbean, are very good at adopting something and then holding everything to ourselves and don't want to share it. But sharing data is a key to our moving forward.
It's essential.
Thanks for the opportunity for that, giving that plug. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. I'm happy you came, and I'm happy you made that intervention. So I would like to thank you all, and I'm speaking not only to the people in the room, but the ones online. Thank you for joining this session. A session is nothing if we don't have an audience. You've been a great audience. I trust the people online have gathered something from the session's presentations. I haven't heard very much from them, but I trust that it was meaningful, and also for the stakeholders here. I want to big up, in Jamaican parlance, big up the colleagues at the table, and thank you all. I think your contributions have been very, very good in underscoring the objectives of this session, and I look forward to seeing you all next door. I won't be the moderator, but I'm sure you will enjoy or be very enlightened by some of the presentations there, and of course the discussion that has been deferred for that session. So thank you all, and have a good rest of conference. Bye-bye.